Hello, this is Chek. Welcome back to my video blog. Today I have something very interesting to share with you. The title of my blog today, as you can see, is Harnessing Your Pleasure Cycle. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's a lot of things we get up to on a daily basis. Some of them small, like little foods or little candies or drinking espresso, and some of them big, like wild, passionate sex or buying things, hopefully that you can afford, driving your sports car with the top down, gardening. There's a wide variety of things that we ourselves interpret as pleasurable. And I'm sure you're aware that some of the things that we perceived to be pleasurable to us actually are challenging to us in the long run. And often, even though we know things like alcohol, recreational drugs, cigarettes, foods that have processed sugars in them, and the list goes on, are challenging for us for some reason, many reasons, we keep consuming them and often create all sorts of health challenges for ourselves, then run to doctors and therapists, pay huge amounts of money to get supplements, drugs, hormones to compensate for what is often really the side effects of medicating ourselves with our chosen pleasure foods, pleasure drinks, pleasure activities. And people will do this right to the grave, even though it's not helping them. In fact, I once read a study that was in a major magazine like The Economist or something years ago when I was doing research, and they looked at terminally ill heart patients who are given 6 months to live if they did not make significant changes in their diet and lifestyle. So they tracked this large group of the people that fell into this class, and then at the end of the study, when most of them had died, in fact, they found out that 95% of the people in the study, many of which had died, would not change their diet and lifestyle. So they went back and interviewed the families of these people, and they asked, for example, why would your father not give up his cigars? Or why would your mother not give up her alcohol? And the most common response they got is, my mom or my dad or my uncle or whoever it was would rather die than not be able to smoke the cigars or drink the alcohol. So what we see is that there's a very, very powerful sense of grounding, connection, satiation, joy, self-medication, mood elevation, and the list goes on from the things that we see pleasurable. And what's really important to understand, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, is if the things that fall into your pleasure categories become more important to you than things that are actually essential for your own personal, professional, and spiritual growth and development, or your own survival, as the heart study examples would show, then what gives you this momentary or temporary gratification can actually be something that's very potentially damaging to a society, because it dampens consciousness and therefore spiritual development. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through what the pleasure cycle is. I'm going to show you the components, and I'm going to show you a model that I built to contain it, to help you explain what we can gain from it through awareness. And we're going to use the example of drinking coffee or espresso, since it's a very, very commonly used pleasure generator, which is also commonly a big problem for the people that use it, shall we say, to the point that it's destructive. But I want to point out in the beginning that the coffee really is only a symbol. It could be sex, it could be money, it could be drugs, it could be exercise, it could be buying things. Anything that you put in there fits to the degree that you're getting some form of pleasure out of it. So really what I'm sharing is I'm going to expose you to a model that's from a resource. So the model I'm going to expose to you here of the 4 components of the pleasure cycle comes from this very good course, Mind Body Medicine, The New Science of Optimal Health, by Professor Jason M. Satterfield from the Great Courses. It's a very good course, and it is very, very in line with what I teach in Holistic Lifestyle Coach level 1 through 3. So there's a resource for that pleasure cycle, and then everything beyond that is something that I've developed based on my own knowledge, coaching experience, wisdom, and experiences with myself. I have a pleasure cycle too. So what do we find here when we look at what are the 4 components of the experience of pleasure? Professor Satterfield cites research that explains that there are, first we have a desire. So if you have to have the desire to drink coffee before you're going to do it. You have to have the desire to eat before you're going to eat something, desire to buy before you're going to buy it. So there's an attraction. Desire is shall we say, a negative force. It's a force of emptiness. So when you desire something, there's already a perception that you don't have that. Okay? But as you'll see later, that can be misleading. Once we desire something, there's anticipation. So we have some kind of expectation of what's going to happen when we do or don't acquire our espresso, our sex, our toys, whatever. Desire leads to anticipation, and then when you bring the substance in or go through the pleasure-generating act, there is sensation. You have some kind of awareness. You're drinking the coffee, there's the sensation, there's the aroma, there's the feel, there's the act of holding the cup, there's the sounds in your favorite coffee shop or your favorite music. The sensation, as I'll show you, relates to the experience. So the sensation, without the sensation, you wouldn't know you were drinking the coffee, having the sex, or smoking the cigarette. The sensation then should lead to satiation or satisfaction. So most of us, for example, if you have a desire for water, you anticipate how much better you're going to feel. You have the sensation of water coming in, but there's also a sensation of when is enough enough. You know, you could technically drown yourself by just drinking and drinking and drinking. So somewhere along, there has to be a level of satisfaction. So this, my point is that this goes on with anything that we need that's going to give us not only pleasure, but maybe a sense of survival, like water. Now, that's the inner model. So those are the 4 categories or qualities of the pleasure cycle. You desire it, you anticipate it, you acquire it and have sensations, and then you decide whether or not you're satisfied. If you're not satisfied with one shot of espresso or whatever, you're probably going to go through the cycle again. Now, depending on the magnitude of the substance, repeated cycles, for example, if you're using a high-power street drug like ecstasy or LSD or something like that, if you're not getting enough satisfaction and you keep going up, you can run into all sorts of problems, as I can tell you from lots of people needing my help to put themselves back together again. So my point is, the cycle only ends in satisfaction when you've reached the cognitive appraisal that you're satisfied. Key point being here that one round, it looks like desire, anticipation, sensation, and all of a sudden I'm satisfied. But I can tell you from lots of experience that one double espresso didn't used to do anything except get me excited for the next one. So part of what we're going to look at is, what is it that keeps us going around, and what keeps the addict forever going around? In my definition, in my 1, 2, 3, 4 for overcoming addiction, obesity, and disease, I define an addiction as any repeated behavior that does not produce the results that you want. So if somebody, for example, has an addiction to alcohol, they can start drinking in the morning and they can keep doing this all day long, but they never really seem to reach a satiation or satisfaction point, which is an important thing to understand, because if you're not reaching the satisfaction point, in my observation as a therapist, it means typically that you're using the wrong substance, the wrong tool, the wrong action, which is usually being driven by a confused belief or perception. Okay, so now we're going to look at the other components in my outer ring. First of all, wherever there's a desire, there's a belief. A woman who is 36 years old and hasn't had a kid yet usually has a very strong belief that she should get pregnant in her lifetime. There may be a biologically driven impetus to fulfill that female objective of bringing life. There could also be family beliefs that if you don't have a baby, then you haven't really done your part in growing the family, or there could be religious connotations. Key point, where there's a desire, there's a belief. The belief might be, without my espresso, I'm going to be too tired to do my work today, or to lift weights well in the gym. So desire is linked to belief. Anticipation is always about a judgment. For example, when I used to need 4 shots of espresso, 2 doubles, I already had anticipated and made a judgment. 1 wasn't going to be enough. 1 was just getting me going. 2 would be what it would take to get me to that state of satisfaction. So the desire and the belief are linked. The anticipation is always based on a judgment. And then the sensation produces the experience. The act of sensing is something that happens in the flow of time. Your neurons are picking up information and passing it to your brain in a flow of sequence, like waves moving. So there's your experience, and whenever we have an experience, if we do or do not achieve satisfaction or satiation, there's an opportunity for awareness. For example, my belief coming in was that I was going to need 2 doubles, so I had already made a judgment. I'd already conditioned my sensory apparatus to not reach satisfaction on the first one because I had the belief that I needed 2. So my awareness began to grow as I found that what was satisfying with 2 double shots now was no longer satisfying. And now I found myself wanting to drink more, but at the same time I was having the awareness that I was getting dried out. My mouth would get all red. My brain would get tired. I would feel almost as though I had severe jet lag. I would have a wired and tired buzz on me, but my head felt empty, like I couldn't string thoughts together. I started having losses of short-term memory. I'd be reading and forget what I just read 2 sentences earlier, which are all indications of adrenal fatigue. So what I'm sharing is that I came into a state of awareness that I wasn't being satisfied and that the need was growing, but my belief, because of my knowledge as a therapist, was I have to reevaluate what it is that I'm really after here, because my awareness was suggesting to me that I'm at the tipping point where I may actually start causing some real problems for myself that would consume more time and energy and not deliver satisfaction or satiation if I kept going. So now what I'd like to do is take you through my model, and then we'll take a look at how do we put this model into context with making decisions in our own life that may be life affirmative, dream affirmative, relationship affirmative. And you'll notice that you're always in relationship with whatever it is you desire. It becomes the object, you're the subject. So I'll try to remember to share, there's some things to remember about relationship challenges. I was having a relationship with that espresso. So I'll come back to that. So in the model that I've developed, that I use as the basis of my teachings, because it's, shall we say, really how the psyche works and how life works. So once you get down to that level, for example, all houses need a foundation. So once you understand the foundation of how energy moves in life, then you can use that as a working model for most things. As most of you have heard me say, and I point out quite nicely in my multimedia ebook, The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need, How to Get Healthy Now, the first thing we need is a direction, a compass, which I call your dream. What is your dream? Only when you know your dream is it possible for you to distinguish, what is satisfaction? Because the dream really is the overarching belief by which you decide what is pleasurable or what isn't pleasurable relative to the objectives or goals of the dream creation process. You know, dreams don't just magically appear. You have to, if you dream about building a new house, it might take you a year to do that. So there's a process involved, and if your dream is to build that house and you're tired but you overuse coffee, you might get halfway through it and be so exhausted it takes you 2 years because you're spending all the time you are in medical clinics trying to get yourself healthy enough to even think about swinging a sledgehammer or digging a ditch. So what is the dream? That becomes your direction. That gives you your GPS coordinates. When you're looking at your pleasure cycle, is it a habit or is it inspiring creativity? Remember, if you're in a habit, we all have the habit of tying our shoes, but most of us don't try changing the style of the knot we use each and every day. We automatically act out the habit of tying a shoe. But if that habit becomes a threat to your dream or your health, as I've described, then we need to invite creativity. And that creativity may be, what else could give me that level of pleasure that isn't so damaging to my body, or shall we say dream negative? What needs to be balanced? So when we're looking at the issue of coffee, we always have to ask ourselves, well, what does coffee do and what do we need relative to where we're out of balance? If you're not getting enough sleep and it's a short-term issue and it's just the use of coffee to pick you up so you can meet a key objective, but then you know you can go catch up on your sleep, then that might work. But if it's a chronic use of coffee and you're already out of balance, particularly to the yang or masculine end of the scale, too dried out, run down, and burnt out, then this is like fire. So adding fire to someone who's already, shall we say, excessive yang is, adding fire to fire. That doesn't really usually work. So when we're asking ourselves, where are we out of balance? Remember, the yin function is the feminine cooling function, and you'll see yin relates to bringing things in. But when we're bringing things in, that's a yin function, but we have to decide, do we need to bring something in that's more yin, more nurturing, more cooling, more hydrating, for example, and more supportive of regenerating structure? Or are we bringing something in that's actually doing the opposite, which, when out of balance, degenerates structure and adds too much dryness to dryness, which for women is a super bad idea. So yin, you see the X, it means multiplies. Yin's function is to multiply energy and resources in the body. So when we eat, we multiply power if we eat according to our needs. When we drink water, we cool the body, we hydrate the body, and we improve our detoxifications, which multiplies our capacity to think, act, create, or our work potential. Yang is dividing power. So the sun sends its energy in every direction, so the power potential of the sun is divided by 360 degrees of self-expression. So yang energy radiates out. Remember, yang relates to the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system. Yin relates to the parasympathetic, the digest, eliminate, growth, and repair system. So when we look at our coffee, you see the question mark. It's going to give us the perception of more power, but it is also going to divide our total power and resources because it's speeding up many other systems and having a biochemical effect on many other systems. And though you may have a period of enhanced psychological performance or cognitive performance, you actually can have quite a backlash period that could last for hours or days or weeks or years or months if you keep the cycle up. So yang relates to heat, yang relates to drying, yang relates to spending power out. It divides our power. So if we're already in a deficient state, can you see that drinking coffee, no matter how good it makes you feel in the short term, actually divides the power that you have in the bank? So if your battery's already low and you hook 3 or 4 more other electrical devices to it, you're dividing the power further. The battery will run down even faster. And as most of you know, just like a computer, when the battery gets to critically low levels, or a phone, there's still power there, but things start to malfunction. The same happens with our pleasure cycle. We may have the desire, and we may anticipate, and we may have sensation, and we may have temporary satisfaction, but if that habit is antagonistic to the actual authentic needs of the body and is not managed by clear awareness of what our dream is and what our 4 doctor core values are, then the habit actually becomes personally destructive or self-destructive and dream destructive. So once we know what our dream is and we know where we're out of balance relative to our authentic needs for nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement, those are the 6 foundation principles that underlie my Holistic Lifestyle Coach program, and those are the things we've always got to be aware of because they determine whether you're healthy or not, whether you're energized and ready, whether you're depleted and deficient. So nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement are the 6 classes of essential needs that we all have to address just to keep ourselves in the game, so to speak. Once we know what our dream is, we know we're out of balance, we can look at what's our dream as Dr. Happy, what diet do we need to bring ourselves into an optimal state so we can experience the creation of our dream ideally and consciously and maintain a level of participatory awareness. How much movement do we need of body, mind, and emotions, and how much rest do we need? So your dream is broken up into those 4 categories, and I show you how to do that both in PPS Success Mastery Lesson 1 and in the last 4 doctors will ever need, How to Get Healthy Now. So then we've got to make choices. Happiness. Dr. Happiness may really love the idea of the espresso. Dr. Movement, going to the gym. Dr. Diet, it may be out of balance with Dr. Diet. It might be too much, shall we say, liberated sugars in the bloodstream to keep Dr. Diet's functions ideal, which triggers insulin levels and cortisol levels going in yo-yo, which leads to long-term stress on the body. And if you keep it going, you'll become a Syndrome X person and a type 2 diabetic. Quiet, well, I think we all would agree that coffee is an antagonist to Dr. Quiet, and even in having a quiet mind, you know, for example, drink a couple shots of espresso and try to meditate, you're going to be, you know, like a dog chasing tires for however long you're sitting there. So if quieting your mind and centering yourself is the key thing for your accomplishment at this time in your goal structure, coffee becomes the wrong tool, which is why we have to have awareness. So now let's take this thing through the cycle and see what we're really being offered for spiritual growth in every round through that pleasure cycle. So first of all, we'll go back to the coffee. I or you, the fictitious person, has the desire to drink coffee. The desire is going to either be based on a want or a need. Wants are things that usually are forms of self-medication or ways of, shall we say, decorating the tree of our life. We all want a beautiful Christmas tree, but we don't need one. You can still have Christmas even without a tree. So there you go. A want can be superfluous, but may not be essential, and some of us are more into the decorating than we are into the tree, which can lead to trouble. In other words, if you can't afford the clothes you're wearing, the car you're driving, but you're doing it anyhow, you're living out your wants, not your needs. So my desire to drink coffee, how does that relate to my nutrition status, my hydration status, and my sleep status? Is it going to enhance or detract, or do I have the resources on board to deal with the, call it the insult of coffee without it being a big deal? If I'm well hydrated, well nourished, and adequately slept, then the coffee is not only not going to be that big of a deal, but you're going to be in a state of balance, so you're really going to feel the effects of 1 cup of coffee or 1 shot of espresso because you're operating from baseline, so the boat's stable, okay? How's my breathing, thinking, and movement? Is the coffee going to be disruptive to my breathing, to my capacity to think relative to accomplishing what I choose to do with my creative life force energy as my dream? And is it going to enhance or detract from my movement? If you take somebody that's got adrenal exhaustion and you give them a couple shots of espresso, it will make them think that they can move better, they will breathe faster, and they will move more, but they will do it at the expense of depleting themselves nutritionally further. If they hydrate with anything other than water, they'll be in trouble, and that stress on the adrenal glands leads to chronic sleep disruption. So we have to always think, what is my dream? That's your chief desire, and is the sub-desire, the coffee, going to disrupt my nutrition, hydration, sleep, yin, and my breathing, thinking, and movement, yang functions? Do I want the coffee or do I need the coffee? Our needs are determined by what we need for our happiness, our dream, our quiet, movement, and diet. The need and the dream governs the belief. That's without going into a long dissertation on that. You know, my dream is to run the Chek Institute favorably so that I share as much of the knowledge that I have and my instructors have with the world for their own benefit, because we've gotten so much joy and satiation from living this way, and because it's harmonious with the earth and what the earth needs, that my belief is really governed. When the espresso starts to become an impediment to that mission, then I have to let the belief become the dominating factor. So the belief links to the needs, not the wants. I have to, if I choose to, figure out what else could I use. So for example, I replace my espresso with Gyasa tea, which is nice and stimulating, but not addictive. And there's an example of being aware, okay? So my dream then is governed by the belief. The judgment is, it's either going to support me in the accomplishment of my dream goals and objectives relative to my dream, or it's not. The experience will give me the information that I need, i.e. I got dried out, tired, and wired. Then I have to adjust my belief, or I have a choice to adjust my belief. So we've come now in cycle, we can see that Paul was having a relationship with espresso. That relationship began by fitting his beliefs and his perceived needs, but it then became an impediment to it. And I realized that what I was wanting was not what I needed. So now I want to share some key points about relationships with person, places, and thing. There's really only 4 things you can do with any relationship, whether it be coffee or somebody. Work on yourself. So if I worked on myself to enhance my nutrition, hydration, and sleep, I could reduce my sense of wanting or needing coffee. If I enhance my breathing, thinking, and movement, I could also change my perceived want or need for coffee. So in my relationship, the first thing I can do is choose to work on myself. The second thing I can do is choose to work on the other. So if it's a relationship with a human being, you can choose to work on the relationship between you and the other. So I could say, well, I'm having a relationship with coffee. I'm doing pretty good with this, but I'm noticing there's a problem. So what I need to do is switch out the other for something that allows me to enjoy the pleasure cycle, but not detract from my dream. So first you can work on yourself. Second, you can work on the relationship, i.e. remove the coffee, maintain the relationship, still have the cup, still have the coffee shop, put something else in the cup. So you made a change in the functional relationship. You can do nothing and just know that you're looking into the crystal ball and things will always be the same, or you can get out of the relationship completely, which would mean to completely stop my relationship with coffee or stimulants, whatever it might be. So to review, you can work on yourself, you can work on the relationship, you can do nothing and it stays the same, or you can get out of it completely. Okay? So we're always going to need to make one of three choices. The optimal is dream affirmative. The suboptimal is based on what we want as a desire, not what we need, and usually causes problems in relation to the fulfillment of your dream weaving process. Or we can do nothing, which means be apathetic, which is one of the options in a relationship. Do nothing, and the past equals the future. Or do nothing means I need to gather more information. I keep reading all these articles about how good coffee is for you and how it stimulates your brain, but I'm not feeling very good. So before I go any further and buy another pound of coffee, I'm going to do nothing with coffee drinking while I do some research on the internet to gather more information. And do nothing also means take a time out. I'm feeling overstimulated by this coffee. I need a little break. I don't want to get too far into this, so calling a time out is doing nothing. So what is your dream? Where are you out of balance? What choices do you need to make to enjoy that pleasure cycle continuously and dream affirmatively in regard to your core values? So here we come to the kind of the punchline of all this. Whatever our belief is leads to anticipation, which is based on a judgment. The belief is I need the coffee. The judgment is I won't feel good and do as much work today without it. The experience is that it gives me whatever experience it does, but then through awareness I make a realization, as I've described in my own experience. Now I come to a point where I meet my belief again. Now, is that belief working for me? I can't get my work done without coffee or espresso. If the belief's no longer working, then I have now got an opportunity to jump out of the box, which represents yin, into a state of transformation. Here we see we're at this tipping point. The I represents the ego or the executor or the chooser. And you're right at this tipping point. By making the right choice, you actually, each of these circles in the spiral represents a lap around the pleasure cycle. So if I replace the coffee with Gyasa tea or something that works for me and is affirmative and supportive of nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and moving, and my 4 doctor values, then as I resatiate myself, I actually climb the loop into awareness, which means I'm actually growing spiritually because I'm becoming more knowledgeable and more aware of everything related to the pleasure cycle, and it's not controlling me. That's what an addiction is. You're now controlled by the substance instead of it controlling you. If I continue to be unconscious, I may have an addiction, a repeated action that does not give me the results I want, which is usually dream negative and often anti-life. Remember, L-I-V-E means live, but if you read it backwards, L-I-V-E is E-V-I-L. So the word evil actually means acting and living in ways that are antagonistic to life itself. So if I continue to not pay attention or keep doing like what a lot of people do, drink the coffee, get a headache, medicate that with something, then medicate the symptoms of whatever I use to medicate with something else, and create a biochemical bomb out of myself who's spending huge amounts of time in doctor's offices getting all sorts of different diagnoses and spending piles of money and not building their house or not playing with their kids or not writing their article or, for God forbid, being somebody's very unproductive employee, which is really common today. I'm sure many of you figured that out. So if you keep going that way, you just become more and more unconscious, so you spiral down, and you'll notice at the bottom of that you have the word matter. At the top you have the word soul. As you evolve, you become more conscious, and as you become more conscious, you become aware that consciousness is within you, and the soul is the consciousness that resides in all aspects of you, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Spiritually means transformation, change, or cause. But if you become more and more unconscious, you become more and more like matter itself. Less dynamic, less creative. Rocks don't paint themselves and build houses out of themselves. They're very, very passive. They sit there and act as, shall we say, an object. So if we objectify ourselves to the degree we become more like matter, we lose our ability to change direction. The further we go this way, the harder it is. Imagine you were a chicken in a shell. Going this way is to break out of the shell and go, wow, there's a whole world out there. Cool! But if you drink too much coffee and burn your adrenal glands out while you're in the shell, you don't develop enough strength to break out of the shell. So we could say metaphorically the shell gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and you get more and more stuck until you finally give up. And that's what we call depression. That's what we call apathy. And that's often what leads people to commit suicide, because they get so far of the sense of connection that the soul provides that the world just becomes like a machine to them that's flat, and they can't really see any reason to live anymore. So there you go. That's it. Desire, anticipation, sensation, satisfaction, beliefs, judgments, experiences, awareness, the possibility to grow and expand spiritually and grow your creative abilities, or to get trapped and become more unconscious, potentially addicted, and lead to fatigue, depression, apathy, and possibly death. What do you love enough to change for? That's your compass. Is it a habit, or could you be more creative as I've described? What do you need? Yin, yang balance. What choices are you willing to make? And what are your values, stated or unstated? If you want to learn more, well, by all means, come to HLC 1. This is just a little snapshot. We do this for 3 solid days and go deeper into all the principles of how to eat, move, and be healthy. You practice everything in there. You have a very skilled, experienced master as a teacher. Other resources, my 1, 2, 3, 4 for overcoming addiction, obesity, and disease is an audio workbook program designed to help people that have challenges they really want to work through. PPS lessons 1 through 3 help you figure out what your dream is, how to manage yourself, and how to set goals. The last 4 doctors I explained, HLC 1. Hope to see you there. That's where you get started to really master this stuff. Hope you enjoyed my presentation today. I will look forward to sharing something with you in the next week or so. Thanks for joining me. I'm Chek.